The Mendocino Council of Governments to order. Can we have roll call?
Yes, and just for your information, our clerk, Jody Loblad, is at a training this week. She's with the California Special Districts Association at a training for board clerks and secretaries. So I'll be calling all the roll call votes today. So Director Haschak?
Here.
Director Carter?
Here.
Director Connie? Director Jeff Hansen in Point Arena? Can you hear me? I see his name on the screen, so we think he's here. Director Norvell in Fort Bragg.
Here. Here.
Okay. Director Duenas apparently has not arrived. And Director Alstrand in Eureka with Caltrans.
Here.
Thank you. And Chair Jurdy.
Here. And just a question. I was under the impression from another board I'm on that when we do Zoom meetings that we have to have our camera on. That's my understanding anyway. I'm just thinking for Director Hansen, not people who are members of the public, for board members. So Director Hansen, if you could turn your camera on, I'm pretty sure we're supposed to have the camera on during the meeting. At least that's the advice we've received at Sonoma Clean Power.
Okay, duly noted, thank you.
Was that, do you recall if that was for the emergency? Yeah, the AB.
He turned his camera on.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, then can we go? Do we have any notices regarding AB 2449?
No, we have not received any requests for that.
All right. Well, they're going to convene the Regional Transportation Planning Agency and recess as that and reconvene as the Policy Advisory Committee. And first thing on our agenda is the consent calendar. Does anyone have any comments on the consent calendar? Or would someone like to make a motion to approve?
I will move that we approve the consent calendar.
Haschak, second.
Okay. So we've got a motion and second to approve the consent calendar. Do we have any public comments on the consent calendar? Not seeing it. Can we have roll call?
Director Haschak?
Yes.
Director Carter?
Yes.
Director Connie?
Yes.
Director Hansen? Director Hansen, can you hear us? We might have lost him there. We'll keep going. Director Norvell?
Yes.
Director Alstrand?
Yes.
And Chair Jurdy.
Yes.
Thank you.
Director Hansen, it looks like your video's resumed. Did you vote on that? There was the consent calendar. Did you want to vote on the consent calendar?
We seem to be having a little technical difficulty with sound. Maybe it seems like he's not hearing us. We have enough votes to carry. The motion carries.
Maybe if someone has his email or cell phone number, they could text him. Maybe someone could, if he's at Point Arena City Hall, maybe someone could text Paul Anderson, city manager.
Chair Jurdy, this is Lisa calling from the office, and I would be happy to look up any information from here if that would be helpful to contact him.
Okay. I think we just want to make sure that Director Hansen is hearing the meeting.
Yeah, I'll also look and see if I can find the contact information here.
Here, Judy,
Yeah, go ahead.
one quick update. We did call City Hall and nobody answered. So we're looking for other phone numbers that we might be able to get to them directly.
I sent a text message to the city manager.
Okay, and I've sent an email to Paul Anderson also. Should we go on to public expression, maybe?
Sure, let's skip ahead on the agenda to item number 9, public expression on non-agenda items. Do we have any members of the public who would like to address the board on items not on today's agenda? Looks like we have one hand raised in the Zoom. Dave?
Thank you, Chair Drury. Just briefly wanted to express my appreciation to the Technical Advisory Committee and to MCOG staff for allowing me to participate over these several last months in TAC activities. It's been very interesting. I've learned a lot from your colleagues, and again, thank you so much for opening the door and making me feel welcome. Best regards.
Okay, thanks. Do we have any other public comments on non-agenda items?
And we have not received anything in the email either.
Director Hansen, do you hear the audio? Okay, well, I don't know what we can do at this point. Yeah, if someone could get a hold of him, yeah. Yeah, so I think we'll just have to go ahead with the meeting and okay, all right. Well, let's go on to our regular calendar then. We have review, discussion, direction for the draft 2024 Regional Transportation Improvement Program.
Good afternoon. As presented at the last meeting, there is a fund estimate for the 2024 STIP of $11.7 million. After taking out the $407,000 for PPM, that'll go to MCOG. There's 11.3 available for the identified target. There is also a maximum that could be proposed of roughly 2 million. However, if we go towards that, we are borrowing from the future. So any available fund estimate for the 26 STIP would be less than what it would be otherwise. So the call for projects were closed on the 29th of September. And in the staff report, you will see a quick summary of the applications that were received. And we had a TAC meeting on the 25th of October. Prior to the TAC meeting, most members reviewed and scored the applications. And so we discussed them. Each agency had a chance to, answer any questions for their respective projects. And then we discussed the scores and ranked the projects. And so on the second page of the staff report, you will see the TAC recommendation. And so they recommended funding the roundabouts at North State Street, the Gualala Downtown Streetscape project, and then skipping the third and fourth ranked projects and going down to rehab projects for the county on Mountain View Road and Kamchi Road. So following the TAC meeting, noticed that there was an issue with some of the scoring. There are two categories that are completely quantitative, and there was an issue with one of them. And so I went through and reviewed all of the scoring sheets and then re-ranked the projects based on any modifications that were made. And what that did was that changed the project ranking to what it should have been, which is in that bottom table on the second page, essentially moving Ackerman Creek from number 4 to number 1, and then leaving the rest in the order that they were ranked previously. And so, based on the revised ranking, staff came up with two possible alternatives. Alternative 1 funds just Ackerman Creek, the roundabouts at North State Street and Gualala. And then alternative 2 also funds, in addition to those three, the rehab project on Mountain View Road. And so both of these would borrow into the future, and the staff report identifies the amount that each one would. Alternative 1 borrows less, and so that's where we are at the moment. We are looking for some direction from the board in terms of which way to proceed. Anything else? That sort of sums it up at the moment. And then there is a draft RTIP. I think it went out. Yeah, it's there. That is missing just specific information towards this new programming. And I didn't want to do that and then have to go back and change it if things were modified. So that'll be completed for you at the December meeting. Are there questions?
Go ahead, Director Hajak.
Yeah, I just, in looking this over, it just seems like option 1 borrows from the future, but less than option 2 by $2 million.
That's correct.
Yeah. And so even though, option 2 is the rehabilitation of Mountain View Road, that's it. That would be added with option 2. Is that correct?
Yes, so option
Yeah.
2 would have the Ackerman Creek Bridge, the two roundabouts on North State Street, the Gualala Downtown Streetscape project, and then the rehab on Mountain View Road.
It just seems from my point of view of borrowing less is probably the more prudent way to proceed. So I'm kind of inclined to go for option 1, even though, we do need to do rehab on these roads. And
So I actually spoke to James earlier today, and my question was, why would we borrow from the future at all and not just have the funding for now? I understand that costs go up, so if you don't approve it now and you put them off until later, you run the risk that then you're even having to borrow more later. So I suppose if we're going to have to take that hit and borrow from the future, I would agree that borrowing less is better.
So maybe it's in the staff report, but I noticed we're, I think, being requested to fund 100% of the cost of the projects. What if the projects were funded based on the amount available? Like the North State Street, 13.9 million.
So in the applications themselves, they did identify all of the funding. For North State Street, it is pretty much all of the project. We've already funded the environmental and design and right-of-way. There's a little bit of county share attached to that one. The Ackerman Creek Bridge is mostly funded by the HBP program, Highway Bridge Program. It's federal funds, as well as some local match and some additional funding, so federal funds, CRISA, and I believe HIP. No, we took the HIP off that. We put the HIP onto the roundabouts in North State. Guala downtown streetscape, funded mostly by ATP, but then a decent chunk by the STIP as well. And Caltrans has put in some state funds into that. And then the county project, the Mountain View Road project, the 2 million is going to augment the project, so it's not paying for the entire thing. It's just paying for a portion of it. The county road fund will pay for the rest of that.
Just another question. So there's a target, I think it's maybe the best way to put it, for the STIP or RTIP. Can that figure not change? Could it potentially go up or down?
The target?
Well,
I mean, I suppose it could if the budget gets bad and they have to revise it. I know that's happened in the past.
Yeah, if the target changed, it would most likely, so the target for this particular programming cycle is unlikely to change at this point. This has been, fund estimate's been adopted by the CTC. If revenues don't materialize based on the projections that were used to develop that target or the maximum, then that would be reflected, most likely, that would be reflected 2 years from now when we're working on the 2026 or 2026 STIP, and so the fund estimate would be reduced at that time to make up for lower revenues. I also want to note, you know, these are the 3 recommendations that you have, you know, it's the tax recommendation and then 2 alternatives that staff came up with that were similar to the TAC recommendation, but that we thought made more sense. But the board can choose to fund any combination, you know, you don't have to go with any of those, you could do something entirely different. However, we cannot partially fund, or we cannot program money for a component that is not fully funded. So if we didn't fully fund the roundabout project, we couldn't program it unless the county was able to commit to funding the balance of it with other funds. So that's just something to keep in mind. We could reserve it for that project until the county had secured the balance of the funds, or we could reserve it for that project to program in the next STIP cycle when there would be more funds available. I would say if that's the plan, though, then it doesn't make a lot of difference whether we borrow from the future now or fully fund it 2 years from now.
it's a question on the North State Street project. I don't know if someone here can answer that. Is there the ability of the county to collect developer fees for any portion of the project? I mean, presumably there's going to be additional development in that area, commercial development, residential.
To go after some other grant like the HSIP grant, although I'm not sure how competitive it would be in that process. And you know, as Nafili said, if the farther we go out into the future, the more expensive it's going to get. Right now, we've already finished CEQA. We've just signed the amendment for PS&E. The consultant's working on that. They're also working on NEPA. We're on track to go into the right-of-way phase and to go into construction potentially in 2026. And so this would be a good use of the STIP funds. We are borrowing from the future, but from a regional standpoint, it's an important project for the region. The TAC definitely supported it. You know, it ranked number 2. And, you know, and we talked at the TAC meeting too about borrowing from the future. And I think everyone felt like this would be a good usage of the funds, and the project's well on its way, so.
So maybe another way of asking the question, and maybe you can't answer it right now,
Yeah.
but I'm pretty sure it's possible for a government agency to front the money for a project and still have developer fees as development occurs to reimburse their proportionate share. So
So that's definitely something we can look into.
I would like to see that because we know no one has enough money, right? So for example, the county definitely doesn't have enough money to pave its county roads. We have funding at this point for 350 of the 650 miles of roads. We have 300 miles that will never be paved unless we come up with new funding sources. So if in a project like this, where there's likely to be commercial development and other development that I would think could reimburse the county at least part of the cost of the project, then by the Department of Transportation being reimbursed, it would have more money in the future for resurfacing of other county roads. And it'd be a way of moving this forward without delaying this project.
So it's definitely something that I can look into and talk to Howard about as well. But so just from my understanding, so you're saying that you're suggesting that we would still be able to use the STIP funds now, but then to recapture some of those costs later in the development fees?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's possible to do, yeah.
Okay.
Might need to work with county council or someone.
Right.
Well,
Okay.
my question for the development fees is that whole area that we're talking about, where the roundabout would be, it's all developed already. So where would that come from? What's your idea on that?
Well, I think there could be regional development that's going to be improved due to these improvements. I don't know. So, you know, maybe the nexus is too thin that you can't really charge it to development in the area, but
I can certainly look into it. And I'm also happy to answer any other questions on any of the other county projects that are listed, or if at some point I could talk a little bit more about both the Ackerman Creek Bridge and Mountain View.
Yeah, if I could. So with the Mountain View Road and the 2 million that looks like it's on shaky ground right now, what would that do to the county's plans for repaving?
So next year we will be in year 6 of the 20-year plan for corrective preventative maintenance. So we are already planning on doing a double chip seal on the about 25 miles of Mountain View Road with the SB1 funds. And we won't really be able to do anything more than that. Anyone that's driven Mountain View knows that that's okay, but there could be better options. So we applied for this additional 2 million to augment that, so that on the our original intent with the application was that the $2 million would cover asphalt overlays on the sharp turns and steep grades where the double chip seal won't really last. Since we submitted the application, another idea that we have considered is that we would be able to do, if we had the additional 2 million, so a little over $7 million total for the project, that we might be able to do a full depth reclamation, rehabilitation on 15 miles plus or minus of Mountain View, and which is a similar process to what we've done on some of the roads in the past. I'll be working with James and Nafili if the board decides to award us that $2 million. I'll work with James and Nafili to find out if the full depth reclamation would actually be, would qualify under the rehabilitation, but if not, at the very least, we're proposing to do asphalt overlays on the sharp turns, steep grades, so that the project will last longer. You know, it's going to be a really long time before we can get back to Mountain View Road. I could also talk to some of the things that the TAC talked about of why they supported the road, if the board. So from a regional standpoint, the TAC felt like it was a good project because connecting the valley to the coast. Also, because of the flooding issues that we've had on the 128, and Highway 1. Mountain View is an important route to keep open. And so the more we can do to rehabilitate the road, the longer it can last, the safer it would be for people to travel on. I think that they also liked the idea of, you know, that this is a project that we will have the results very quickly. You know, the TAC gives $2 million to the project, and we'll get $7 million of construction that'll be completed by the end of next summer. So it's not like, you know, years out. It'll happen very quickly.
And without the 2 million, then you would just do the straight chip seal?
Just a double chip seal.
And you can't, I mean, in 3 years, if we came back and said, oh, here's 2 million, could you go back and do that on top of it?
Well, $2 million then would probably, we wouldn't be able to get as much done with $2 million, right, in 2 years. And where are we going to be in 2 years? We'll be on Kamsha Ukiah. So the other thing is the mobilization costs and everything, right? Yeah. So if we're there, we're on Mountain View Road next year. If we have one contractor that's doing the entire project, then we get the most bang for our buck just in the immediate. I wouldn't say it's out of the question to do it 2 years from now, but we definitely wouldn't, that $2 million would not go nearly as far because of inflation, because of mobilization, things like that.
So I do want to point out, it looks like Director Norvell has his hand up, and I believe that Director Hansen has been able to join us by phone.
Okay, great. Director Norvell?
Thank you. Supervisor Hafter did ask the question that I was after, but I guess my opinion on that would be listening to staff is sounding more like, although I'm generally not a big fan of borrowing money, that using that $2 million is going to go a lot farther today than it would getting to it later down the road. And it may save, as she explained, the need for the road when the 128th flooding. And it just seems like for the long term, spending the $2 million today, opposed to hoping you're going to have the money to do it right later. Spending the $2 million today seems like a better option. Thank you.
Okay. And I'm not sure, was there a hand raised by Director Hansen also?
No.
No, I just wanted to note that he was able to join us.
Okay, great. Can I ask?
I don't know, that is a question for Scott.
Maybe Director Norvell could sit closer to the owl.
I think in that room there's...
Are you having a hard time hearing me?
It's better now, yeah.
All right. A couple other things I wanted to mention, just regarding the Chair Jurdy, your comment about the projects wanting full funding. So James pointed out the other funding sources that were on the North State project, the roundabout project. But I wanted to add the Ackerman Creek. This is also just the balance portion of the match for a much larger project. I don't know the total amount, but it is a larger project, so this is only a small portion of the funding, leveraging quite a bit of bridge program funding on that one. And then the Caltrans request for the Wallala Downtown Streetscape, the 1.2 million listed, that is half of what they've determined their funding shortfall is. So, and that would be, so we'd mentioned last time there was money set aside in the last RTIP for that project that had been carried forward from the previous RTIP. That is not in addition to what was set aside. So that would be from that amount, which was included in the overall target. So I just wanted to mention that most of these projects do have other funds attached to them as well.
Okay, thanks. Go ahead.
So speaking to what Nafili was saying for the Ackerman Creek Bridge, so the total project costs are estimated to be about 17 million. So that includes all the way from design and environmental right-of-way through construction, with close to $15 million in construction. So the 600,000 that we're requesting is, 3.5% of the total overall project cost. This is another project that's very important, has a lot of regional benefits. It's anyone that's driven over the Ackerman Creek Bridge knows that it's very narrow. It's not safe for bicyclists and pedestrians. The bridge will actually be lowered as part of the project, and so the sight distance for coming in and out of the businesses around the area will be safer. There's also a fish ladder, a concrete fish ladder underneath in the Ackerman Creek that will be doing some stream restoration work and actually putting in a more natural fish passageway. And that is really supported by the Pinoleville tribe as well. And we've been working with them on the stream restoration part of the work. And so that 600,000 is really just a small portion, yes, of the overall project. That's just north of Ukiah, yeah, by Wyatt Irrigation. It's a bottleneck too. We did the North State Street widening project in, I believe, '09, something like that. And so everywhere else there's wider shoulders, bike paths, but it narrows at the bridge. And beyond its structural deficiencies and seismic issues. Oh, and we're finishing up PS&E and right-of-way and planning on advertising to go to construction next summer. So that one's another one that we're really close to construction.
Go ahead.
I know it's hard to know this because it's dependent on revenues that come in, but is the FE typically pretty consistent from each 2-year cycle, one 2-year cycle to the next?
No.
Okay.
No, especially over the last decade, we've had highs, and we had one for the first time in the history of locally controlled STIP. We had 1 year where we had to deprogram funds. That was in 2016. Post SB1, which was in 2017, it has stabilized, so it's definitely better. The big sort of unknown factor going forward, and the state goes through a lengthy process trying to come up with logical assumptions to use in developing their projections, but the big question is the funding that is the revenues that come from the excise tax on fuel. So fuel usage continues to go down as efficiency in vehicles improves and people switch to electric vehicles, which is good, but it means that there's less revenues collected that way. What has happened in the last couple years, though, is because the excise tax, there's an adjustable portion of that is intended to essentially mimic sales tax. So sales tax is a percentage of the sale, and so because prices have gone up, fuel prices have gone up, the amount that would be collected if there were sales tax on gas rather than excise has gone up, and so that price adjusted excise tax has gone up as well. So that has resulted in more revenue. So there is, I would say, since SB1, they did overproject future revenues a little bit the very first STIP cycle following that, which would have been the 2018 STIP cycle. So then in 2020, there was a little bit less available. I mean, it wasn't a zero fund estimate. It wasn't a negative fund estimate, but there was, 3.1 million was our target in 2020. And that was kind of largely around the state because they had sort of over projected in the 2018 STIP cycle. And so they already had things programmed that would use some of the money that would have been available in that one. I would say since then, they've been fairly accurate. And so with this, the maximum that James discussed, that is a maximum through, I believe it is 3031, fiscal year 3031, which is 3 years into the 2026. So each STIP cycle is 5 years. This would be 3 years into that STIP cycle. So there would be an additional chunk of revenue that would be included in the 2026 STIP cycle that is not reflected in that 36 million max. So it doesn't, if you borrowed from that, it is likely that there would be additional money beyond this max also available in the next STIP cycle.
So, can I? Go ahead. Okay. So if I'm getting this right, we have these projects that are proposed, and if we go for the Mountain View Road, that, well, and the other, we're borrowing from the future. And it just means we'll have less available in the future, but this is pretty much, this money is going to keep coming, barring some kind of catastrophic event at the state level. But we will have this money available at, in 2026. We just don't have it now. And we've got to kind of borrow against that future,
Yes, anything over our target amount, which is 11.3 million, or 11.7 million, including the PPM funds, would basically be an advance of funds that would be available in the 2026 STIP. So you could fund any combination of these things, but just if you went in the order of the adjusted TAC ranking, anything other than the number one project would, well, that's not true. If you went in order, number one is only 600,000, it's a low amount, but then on to number two, as we discussed, just that project alone is over the target. Number three is another 1.2 million. So you certainly can choose to stick to that target. We could fund the first ranked project and then reserve the money for the second ranked project, or fund some other combination of projects up to that target amount. Or if you want to fully fund, other projects, then we could advance funds that would be available in the 2026 STIP.
So if we don't have the money from the state right now, where does that money come from? So if you say, okay, we're going to fund the Mountain View Road for $2 million, and we don't have it, we're projecting for the 26 budget, then where, I don't understand where that money comes from.
So we can, the max is there. The max is, that's provided to us. So the state would not, if every region in California proposed programming up to their max, the state would not be able to program those things. But there's some flexibility because not all regions program all of their funding. So like the last two STIP cycles, MCOG has not programmed all of its STIP funding. We've kept some in reserve. So because some regions do that, then it gives the state flexibility to allow additional programming in other regions.
Oh, so the max is the 36 million.
The max is the 36 million. Yes.
So I think ultimately the answer is it would come from the state. The money would come from the state. They just would give us less in 2026 when we get the next.
Yes.
Right. Okay. So I think it's important for us all to recognize that, yes, there's value in dipping into the future just so that we can save money in the long run, because we know from the last few years, costs continue to increase astronomically. However, this list as it is now isn't the only list that's going to come before us. All the projects are important, and there are others waiting in the wings. So there will be another list with more projects that are just as important to someone in the county in 2 years. So just something for us all to keep in mind, that, you know, there's always going to be demand.
Yes,
It's always going to exceed the amount that's there.
A very good point, yes. Borrowing from the future to fund, and we even, the TAC did even discuss this, well, you know, they saw that 36 million, they said, well, why don't we just fund all of them? And so we talked about that very thing. The more you borrow from the future, the more you are potentially hurting the agencies that did not apply in this round. You know, they may have projects next time, or the projects that hadn't you know, weren't at a state that they could be applications yet. So yeah, that's something to consider. The more you borrow from the future, the more you are taking away from those agencies and those future projects.
Now, are you hearing a lot of these future projects? Are there, you know, entities out there lined up to present more projects?
I don't know. I have not heard one way or another. I haven't heard. I would say if we go over our target, the less we go over, the more likely the CTC is to approve our request. You know, if we were to propose $20 million in programming, or up to our max, that might be harder to get approved. But I think if we're over by a smaller amount, it'll be more likely to be fully approved.
I think that if it were my decision alone to make, I would probably most likely want to fund the North State Street intersections and the Ackerman Bridge and hold there. I don't feel strongly one way or the other about Mountain View Road, but if everyone else thinks that's an important way to go, I'm willing to go with that recommendation. I definitely think the TAC recommendation is exuberant, and I would not support all of that allocation.
I'd feel good if we approved alternate 2, because at least it would put longer lasting asphalt on those corners and higher grades on Mountain View Road. And I do think from some chip seals I've seen where there are sharp turns that they tend to wear out pretty quickly. And an example of that in Fort Bragg is on Boatyard Drive, where there was a chip seal and it wore out pretty quickly. Granted, there were heavy delivery trucks coming on that road, but still kind of shows what happens on sharp turns on chip seal roads.
Director Kane, you didn't include.
I would just like to interject that to those of us that live on the coast, Mountain View Road is an extremely important route. Keep open and safe.
So you didn't include Wallala streetscape when you were talking. Was that an oversight, or did you?
Yes, I'm sorry.
It wasn't an oversight. I just really don't like borrowing, but I understand the need for it, and like I said, they're all important projects.
You're just trying to get that balance.
I'm trying to minimize the reach.
Yeah.
So I don't know if the board's getting close to making a motion, but I would, I don't think we've actually had public comment. I know Alicia responded to specific questions, but I don't think we've actually called for a public comment.
Good point. Do we have any members of the public who wish to address this item?
Yes, please.
Go ahead.
Thank you very much. Thanks for taking my comment. I appreciate the conversation today amongst members of the board. It's really tough to spend into a debt condition, or at least something that appears to be a debt condition, although this particular system is designed to accommodate a certain amount of advanced spending. Every one of you is, I'm sure, very sensitive to this crazy situation we've been in over the last several years where construction costs, labor costs are just spinning out of control. And there doesn't appear to be any lessening of that trend. So having the ability to allocate funds and move sooner than later is a big advantage. The certainty is a big deal. Yep, more projects are going to come up in the future, but we have to really deal with the backlog we have in front of us today if the opportunity presents itself. I'm concerned about Director Connie's lack of interest in the Walla project, which has been something of great importance to the South Coast, recognizing it's not of similar importance to the central part of the county. However, this has been a project that both Caltrans and certainly the South Coast and the county have labored long and hard to advance, and it is substantially funded. We're looking at a late condition where within the MCOG's previous commitment in STIP cycle, we need a little bit more money to close gaps, and Caltrans is going to match that gap. I appreciate staff's objective assessment of priorities using the device that was prepared with scoring. However, I want to, as forcefully as I can, encourage MCOG not to step back away from the Walla project at this time, to keep the commitments that have been made. The net out of pocket at this point is going to be less than the commitment that the MCOG has been carrying over years of cycle. This is the time to advance and complete that project. Please do not step away from that project. Thank you.
Okay, we've got another hand raised.
Hi, everyone. My name is Katie Everett. I am the Caltrans project manager for the Walla Downtown Enhancement Project. I would hope that the board can see that this is a very valuable project and consider the 1.2 million request to help support the project. If it is not approved, we will need to look at some cost savings measures within it. This project does provide 11-foot lane widths and cycling paths, class 2 cycling past the 5 feet, and also sidewalks throughout the community, which are much needed to help ease congestion and provide travel for all pedestrians and cars within the community. It has been a very well-supported project by the community, and we do feel that it will help to bring that community sense within the project within the area. I would be happy to take any questions if you have any for me. Thank you.
I'd also like to make a comment about the Walla project. Caltrans is nearing the end of their PA&AD component, which is the environmental component of project development. And so they will be coming to the MCOG board next meeting or the following meeting to present their final project concept that'll come out of the PA&AD process. So there will be an opportunity to hear more about that soon.
So I have a question. You know, interest rates were almost nothing. They were like below 3%. Now it's around 8 or so. Does the CTC charge any interest when you get an advance on these funds?
No.
So it's a 0% loan, and we've got inflation on construction costs. So we would get ahead in two ways. One, we'd be building before costs go up further. Two, we would be borrowing money at no cost.
Yes. So, I mean, yes, but we won't be able to, the CTC is not going to say, yes, you get all of this money next year. It'll be spread out over the 5 years. So we might propose, with the Ackerman Creek Bridge project, because it's a small amount, if we said we want to have this in the first year of that 5-year cycle, they probably would go for it. The matching funds for one of the rehab projects, maybe. Any amounts beyond that would be unlikely to be programmed in the early years. So although, yes, it would come from this STIP cycle, it is unlikely that the majority of it would be in the early years. So it'll still be out several years. So we'll be able to get ahead of it somewhat, but not entirely.
Yeah, so I get that, because I know that much of the STIP money is available really in year 5.
Yes.
And so I'm really just looking at a 2-year advance.
Yes.
Really. So I'm just putting in 8% interest times 2 years on, just on $4 million, that's $600,000 in interest. And then that's not looking at costs going up some amount during those 2 years. So I'm not looking, I'm just.
Yeah,
saying-
but no,
it's like,
they do
there
not
aren't-
charge
There are
interest.
not that many deals this good. You get interest-free money, knowing that you have inflation in the background too. Would someone like to make a motion? Do we have any kind of close to, go ahead, yeah.
I just wanted to make a comment in response to the last 2 public comments. It's not a lack of interest in the Willala Street project that I have. As I said, I believe all of these projects are worthy and important. I'm merely trying to acknowledge the fact that we have a limited pool of money and an ongoing need all over the county. So the proposal that I made, I recognize is not likely to be embraced by the board, but it is an attempt at acknowledging that we have limited funds. So no disrespect meant to the people on the coast, because I recognize these are important projects and I do support them, just trying to be mindful.
Yeah, if I could comment.
Yeah.
I certainly took it as, your attempt to keep within our means, right, of what we have. And that's how I came into the meeting today, thinking, yeah, we can't be, going ahead of ourselves. We've already, we know what a budget mess is with the county. But this seems like a little different, and it's like almost buying a house or making those repairs that are needed, and we can get a mortgage on it. And, it will limit our options in the future. But at the same time, these are projects that really need to be done regardless of when they're done. And so, I'm willing to kind of go over and try to get more of the money now so that we can get the work done and do these necessary projects. So with that, I would move that we accept alternative 2, which is, I see it as kind of a compromise between what the TAC recommended and the balanced budget approach.
I will second that motion.
Okay. Do we have any discussion on the motion?
And I don't know if we need a formal, and maybe Janet or Loretta can answer this question. I don't know if we need a formal roll call vote. This is just staff direction today. We'll use we do need. Okay.
Staff says it's necessary.
Okay, so we do then.
Okay, all right. I'm not seeing any board member comments. I guess, can we have a roll call?
Yes, Director Housecheck,
Yes.
Director Carter,
Yes.
Director Connie,
No.
Director Hansen.
Yes.
That's a yes? Thank you.
Yes.
Director Norvell,
Yes.
Director Alstrand,
Yes.
and Chair Jurdy.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries.
Okay, that takes us to item number 11, which is the SB 125 funding.
All right. So at the last meeting, I gave an update on SB 125, which was a budget trailer bill that provided a large chunk of funding to the Transit and Intercity Rail Capital Program and the New Zero Emission Transit Capital Program. This funding is being distributed on formulas based on population and transit operations, or 2 different formulas based on on those factors. The funds will be approved by the regional transportation planning agencies for use by public transit operators in their region. Projects can be operations or capital projects. Our region will receive a total of $11,063,615 over a 4-year period. I've broken down the funding over the 4 years in the table in your staff report, but the bulk of the money, all but to 560,000 or something, will be in the first 2 years. So one of the big requirements that we are dealing with right now is that in order to get an allocation of those funds in the 23-24 fiscal year, we need to submit an initial allocation plan that includes a lot of different information by December 31st of this year. So that means adoption by the MCOG board at the December meeting. With that in mind, we have worked with MTA to develop a list of projects and what is a working draft of this allocation plan. So the plan itself has to include a description of actions that are being taken by the transit operators in the region, which in our case is just MTA. They are the only public transit operator, to address operational deficit and transit funding sustainability in the region. We have to include a justification of our strategy for using SB1 funding for both capital and operating funds, and then an explanation of the distribution among operators and projects. So MTA has proposed 3 uses for this first year of funding, and we are just programming the first year of funding at this point, which is $5,353,525. So what they have proposed is three major projects. First is money towards development of the new Ukiah Transit Center. So this would be to implement the findings from the current transit center location analysis study that we've been working on with them. This first year would allocate $2 million, and that would again be for development. It is expected that ultimately a competitive TIRCP grant would be applied for to fully fund construction of that center. So this would just be for project development and land acquisition to get that process started. And then the second project is an operational project proposed by MTA. This would be $500,000, and this would be to implement an unmet transit need that was looked at in the feasibility study of mobility solutions for rural communities of inland Mendocino County. What MTA is proposing is purchase of 1 or more zero-emission vehicles to fund a service that would, a couple days a week, bring passengers from Laytonville or Covelo to Willits, and then in Willits they would transfer, they would have the ability, they could be dropped off at their destination of choice in Willits, and then could transfer to the existing services in Willits, and from there could also reach Ukiah via existing MTA services. So this does vary. As I mentioned in my staff report, it's exciting to see MTA looking into this and trying to meet these unmet transit needs, but it does differ from the project that was identified in our mobility solutions study and that was vetted with the community there, in that service was 1 vehicle from their community all the way to Ukiah and to destinations within Ukiah. This would be different. It would require, in order to get to Ukiah, would require multiple transfers, so it does vary quite a bit. Reasons for that are, 1, to utilize existing services that are already being provided, and then also to enable the use of zero-emission vehicles. We've talked with MTA quite a bit, and it's an unfortunate fact that current ZEV technology does not offer a transit vehicle, does not offer the type of transit vehicle that could be used for this service that has an adequate range to get to Covelo, for a driver to get to Covelo, bring passengers back, and then possibly charge and then go back again. The current estimate, I believe, is about 70 miles is the expected range in our climate and over that terrain. So quite a few limitations. So in order to use a zero emission transit vehicle, it does have some restrictions on what can be done. This is a demonstration. This would be operated by MTA as a demonstration program. So MCOG staff has concerns that it may not, if it's a pilot, if it's meant to show how well the service is going to be used, that is not going to be used as well as, or as much as something, the type of service that was included in the feasibility study. That being said, it's probably more affordable for MTA because it's largely using existing services. So there are pros and cons to this approach, certainly. I will say one big unknown with this is whether it will be fully eligible for these funds. And we actually have a meeting set for tomorrow. Unfortunately, it fell after this board meeting to meet with the California State Transportation Agency staff. That's the state agency that is administering the SB 125 funding. We're meeting with them to talk about a number of things, including project eligibility. So if this is not eligible, if the operations portion is not eligible, because the vehicle should be eligible regardless, we'll have to rethink the approach to this, certainly, and it'll most likely be withdrawn from this current allocation plan and could be a consideration for the next one, because we will have to do this again next year. We also will be able to amend this allocation plan in the future. We just have to get the initial one in by the end of the year. The third project, which is would utilize the balance of the funding available after those first two, and then the administrative funds that are available for use by MCOG, would be just continuation of MTA's transition to zero-emission fleet. So continued purchase of zero-emission vehicles, and that would be $2,742,889. These numbers are all sort of draft at this point. There sort of was a range of funding that each of them might need, and so these are the numbers we use. So when this comes back to you in December, these numbers might look a little different. So today, this is just an opportunity because we need to adopt in December. We wanted to give the board some opportunity for initial feedback on these project proposals before we move forward with finalizing the allocation plan. And the allocation plan draft, like I said, it is attached. There's a lot of blanks left to be filled in on that plan, a lot of detail left to be provided. That'll be based on the projects, but also just overall operational data, and then the plan for ongoing sustainability within the region. So that's my staff report, and I'm happy to answer any questions. And I do see that Jacob King is in the meeting as well, and so if there are specific questions about what they have proposed, he may also be able to answer.
Well, I have a question either for Jacob or for Nafili. So if it turns out in your meeting you find out that the operational costs for the transit to the North County is not eligible, would you and or MTA want to proceed with the allocation for the equipment, or would you want to just postpone that decision to see is there another funding source for the operation, or do you want to go back to a different model for serving the North County?
Well, I'll give my answer, and then maybe if Jacob's answer differs, he can chime in. So the way I see it, there wouldn't be any harm in keeping that one vehicle in this initial allocation because it can be amended. So if we kept it in and then several months from now, it seemed like there really wasn't going to be a way to get this up and running the following year, because we could then, seek additional funds, try to figure something out. If it looked like it were not going to be possible, we could amend this allocation and change that specific vehicle to another vehicle that might fit in with MTA's, or if that vehicle might fit in with their vehicle replacement plan anyway. So I think it wouldn't hurt to keep it in, at least the capital portion of it.
I would agree.
Other questions?
Well, it just seemed to me from the meetings I attended with the Mobility Solutions that a lot of the concerns from the people in Covelo and Laytonville were getting to doctor's appointments, getting to dialysis treatment, getting to shopping places, especially now that the grocery store in Laytonville is not even functional. Getting to some of those real necessities that people have a problem, with transportation. And looking at this options, it just seems like if a person has to go from Covelo to Willits and transfer, and then go from Willits to Ukiah and then transfer, and they're dealing with some kind of medical issue, or just having trouble getting around themselves, or buying things and wanting to carry it back, it just seems like that's going to be a deterrent. And I understand that there's, the technical issues about, electric vehicles making it to Covelo and back. So I just wanted to make sure that you were looking at all the options, and maybe another idea I was just thinking of was, okay, Laytonville to Ukiah seems like it's within the range of the electric vehicle that you're looking at. So maybe that could be another option, just a straight shot there, because it seemed like a lot of people wanted that option.
So if I could make a comment.
Yeah.
So in Mendocino County, MTA, we do about 2,800 miles a day. We have dialysis patients down in Point Arena that get dialysis up in Fort Bragg. They have to transfer from the 75 onto the Route 60 and then into the Route 5 bus. So that it's pretty similar to that. We're doing that every day. So it's not uncommon in transit that we would do transfers. MTA does them, 6 days a week, and we've been doing it for a number of years seamlessly. I drove for 16 years, and I was a part of that group, that was driving those folks around. And I can tell you right now, John, I never heard, I always heard good things, like they were happy to have the transit and transportation. It was never a negative. So if that could put that to bed.
Well, I appreciate that perspective.
May I? I'm not sure that you could actually make it from Laytonville into Ukiah and back, because that's close to 50 miles one way. I know because my wife worked at State and Gobi, and we're 8 miles south of Laytonville, and she drove 42 miles one way to get to work. And that's counting going back up Ridgewood grade. So I'm not sure an electric vehicle would be able to make a round trip without having to recharge in Ukiah.
Yeah, but they could recharge.
Yeah, they could recharge, but the one of the key things is, and I know from doing shopping, the people in Laytonville want to go down there and they want to do grocery shopping, and you've got to have a vehicle down there if you're going to be hauling 5 or 6 bags of groceries back up. Getting on a MTA bus and going back up to Willits and then transferring over to another vehicle to go back is gonna be a bit of a problem with somebody who's got a whole bunch of grocery bags.
I also just want to add that the other part of it to consider is that I believe that MTA is planning to station this vehicle in Willits. So there's the initial Willits to Laytonville or Willits to Covelo, and then back to Willits or Ukiah. So it's not just Covelo to Willits or Ukiah or Laytonville to Ukiah. It's also that first trip from Willits.
Okay, so that they would basically probably end up dropping them off at the bus stop at the college on the north end on Commercial, because that's the first bus stop in Willits that I know of. And then they catch the MTA from there and go throughout Willits or go down to Ukiah or end up down in Santa Rosa if they
Right.
pick that one.
I don't know if MTA has worked it out to that level of detail yet, but I think the general idea is that, yes, that at somewhere in Willits, they would transfer to the existing fixed route service.
So if I can also make a comment, so having the vehicle there in Willits, being stored in Willits, it is closer to our maintenance personnel if anything were to go down. Plus there is a backup vehicle that would be there, plus the infrastructure to be able to use for charging there in Willits. We would look at things such as a driver pool. What we've learned since the pandemic and just before the pandemic, a lot of the driver pool is coming out of the Willits and Ukiah areas. So if there was a vehicle that was stored in one of those locations, such as Covelo or Laytonville, and the driver couldn't drive that day, it would take an hour plus just to get the driver to the vehicle. Having the vehicle stored there in Willits would provide a vast driver pool, including supervisors who could jump in and actually take care of the route and make it more convenient for the passengers so that there wouldn't be, or there'd be a seamless transition for those passengers.
I just wanted to say that I think that all three of these proposed projects are reasonable. I'm pleased that MTA is looking at addressing those unmet transit needs, and I trust that they will be able to figure out how best to do that in the most efficient manner.
Okay, I don't know if we took public comment, but if we do have any public comment on this item, this would be the time to offer it. Would someone like to make a motion?
Can I make
Go
one
ahead.
one more comment? Because I'm, hearing concerns about the operational proposal, and like I said, at this point, I do not know if that will be 100% eligible. However, because there are some concerns, we could include it in this initial allocation plan, word it in a way that would allow some flexibility about what the final service would look like. And then in that first year, which would include, as proposed, would include vehicle acquisition and, administrative planning of the service, we could work with MTA to explore other options, see if there is any other feasible option.
That certainly sounds reasonable, and I'll put that into a motion.
Okay.
And accepting the other proposals too. Does that make sense?
Yes.
I will second the motion.
Okay. Can we, not seeing any hands raised, can we have a roll call?
Director Hashtag?
Yes.
Director Carter?
Yes.
Director Connie?
Yes.
Director Hansen?
Yes.
Director Norville?
Yes.
Director Alstrand,
Yes.
and Chair Jurdy.
Yes.
Motion carries. Thank you.
Okay, that takes us to James's report on the carbon reduction program.
All right, the carbon reduction program is a new federal funding source through the FHWA that flows through the RTPA. It is similar, not in its purpose, but in the way it's coming through as the HIP funds. The purpose of this, as you may figure out, is to reduce carbon emissions. And so we have, through federal fiscal year 22, 161,000 and change, and federal fiscal year 23, 164,000 and change, for just over $325,500. And before we can actually program the funds, we had to come up with some sort of project selection strategy that would be used as the basis for all of this. And so that is something that staff has done. We came up with a draft. I will be honest, I stole a lot of it from Shasta. And so they modified it to fit the MCOG region. And so we took that to the TAC. The TAC had no comments on that. They did have one comment on the call for projects piece, which you also have, and that was just looking at the initial evaluation criteria. So I modified that based on their feedback, and what you have before you is what they have reviewed, I hope, and recommended that the board approve. There are going to be, I believe, 3 more cycles of funding. We just don't know how much. And so they have, the first cycle of funds has to be obligated by September 30th of 25, and then expended by the end of September of 30, and then each subsequent year is just 1 year after the next. Are there questions?
You kind of skipped over that kind of quickly there. So the obligation deadline, what I'm reading, is September 30th, 2025.
Correct.
What's the deadline for cities, county, whoever, to submit a proposal to MCOG?
Haven't done that yet. So in the call for projects, there is a table that shows like when the call will go out and all that stuff, and that is blank, just because at the moment we had to wait for the board to approve this. And so I am anticipating putting out a call beginning of January or beginning of the new year, after the holidays, when hopefully people are back in the office and I no longer have to worry about the RTIP, and then go from there.
And did the report say, I'm not seeing it, how much, is there a target number for Mendocino County, or is it just that we're going to propose projects to the CTC?
So
Or
in
someone.
the third paragraph, it states the 161,000 and change for cycle 1, and then 164,000 and change for cycle 2 of the staff report. That's
Okay.
all that we know so far. We don't have the other amounts for the subsequent years, but we anticipate them being similar.
Got it. So those are apportionment amounts, but are there going to be competitive amounts statewide, or is this, this is it?
It's formula funds. So this is what we get.
And so the first call for projects that'll likely be in January would be the first 2 years of funding, so 325,000. So it's a relatively small funding source.
Any comments, hands raised?
Well, just a question. So if a county or a city had an idea of converting to electric vehicles, would that be, a proposal for this?
I believe that charging infrastructure is eligible. The vehicles themselves, I don't believe vehicles themselves would be eligible, but charging infrastructure would.
Okay. Planning wouldn't.
No, these are implementation funds.
Would a city be able to use it to repaint the green on their bike lanes?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
Bike and ped projects should be just generally eligible.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
And I'll add, just because it is a small source of funding, unless it's being used as a match for something else, and these are federal funds, so they could match, I don't know what they could match, but in any case, they are federal funds, so and a small amount, so most likely, the projects that are going to come forward will be more easily implemented projects along those lines.
So are federal funds easier or harder to use than state funds?
Yeah, they're harder to use. There are
Stay away.
just a lot more administrative costs associated with them, more reporting, environmental.
Are there certain type of projects that are easier to use these funds? You know, like buying something, a piece of equipment, is that easier than building something?
So I'd say anything that doesn't involve right-of-way would be easier, or that is going to be, something that would be eligible for categorical exemption under CEQA or exclusion under NEPA. Anything that has sort of reduced project development needs would be easier to implement with these funds.
Or alternately, you take an already existing federalized project?
Yes, that's a good point. So an existing federalized project that this would just be added to, that's going to have to go through those steps anyway, and maybe has already gone through those steps, these could certainly be added to a project like that.
Okay. Would someone like to make a motion to approve the carbonized reduction policy and call for projects?
Also move.
Okay.
Second.
And I'm not seeing any hands raised, but do we have any public comment on this item? Okay, can we have roll call?
Excuse me, who was the second on that? Was that
I was.
Director Housecheck? Thank you. All right, Director Housecheck,
Yes.
Director Carter,
Yes.
Director Connie, Director Hansen,
Yes.
Director Norvell,
Yes.
Director Alstrand,
Yes.
and Chair Judy.
Yes.
Motion carries. Thank you.
Okay, well then, we're going to recess as the Policy Advisory Committee, reconvene as the Regional Transportation Planning Agency. Do we have a motion to ratify the actions of the Policy Advisory Committee?
I will so move.
Second.
Okay. Can we have roll call?
Housecheck,
Yes.
Carter,
Yes.
Connie, Hansen, Director Hansen, and Point Arena. Appears to have left the meeting. All right. And Chair Judy.
Yes.
Motion carries. Thank you.
Oh, did you, Director Novell and Fulbright?
Director Norvell and Fort Bragg.
Thank you. Yes.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, that takes us on to reports. Are there any reports from Caltrans?
Hi, I have asked Julia Peterson to join us today to give us some updates on the local agency Clean California grants that were awarded in Mendocino County.
Good afternoon. I am Julia Peterson, as it says right below. I guess you guys can't see it, right about there, with Clean California Coordinator and Project Manager. And I understand that you saw that Mendocino had huge success in the local grant cycle 2. It looked like $7.75 million is coming to Mendocino through the Clean California local grants. So that should be quite a nice effort to beautify Mendocino. Were there any questions about those grants?
Not a question, just a comment. I think the Anderson Valley Track and Field Project should probably get the award for most creative use of Clean California funds. I would never have guessed that was an eligible expense.
Yep. it seemed to take a little while for people to realize that parks and recreation and that type of thing was eligible. And I think they're probably our most, one of our most, I don't want to say grateful, but she keeps sending me little videos of the kids and the community and how excited everyone is in that community to receive the grant. So very enthusiastic. But the grants, as some of you may recall, were recommended to be up to $3 million was for most consideration, but they would consider up to 5 million. And Mendocino really had two, one almost 3 million and one at almost 5 million. We had some really good grant recipients that I think will make a pretty big difference in Willits and in Anderson Valley. Timeline for those, in case you're wondering, kind of the whirlwind speed with Clean California. We're working on the grant agreements now, and all of the work that they've promised will need to be completed by June of 2026. So they have 2.5 years to get that done. So it's going to go fast. Anderson Valley has a lot of work ahead of them, but they'll be enjoying it pretty for the fall of 27. They should be enjoying their day. So I think if there's any other questions about the local grants, I can give you a very brief dump day update and see whether, and I don't know if you're interested in where we are at Covelo with the beautification project. My time is yours. What would you like to ask me about?
I just wanted to make a quick comment that the community of Willits is very grateful to have been a recipient of this grant and excited about the fast implementation. So many times projects take years and decades, and to have a fast turnaround makes it difficult for staff or challenging, but very exciting for the community to know that they'll see results soon. So thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm glad that Willits is excited about it, because I think California really has been a good opportunity to really make a difference in a lot of small communities. It's designed for underserved communities, and here in District 1, we have a lot of deserving communities. So,
yeah,
so
I just like, Julia, thank you for all your work. You know, Willits and Covelo are very excited about what's going on, and certainly the work that Clean California and Complete Streets has done in Covelo is very, well appreciaed. So.
Well, thank you, John. The Covelo project is on suspension. We were awaiting some components, and it looks like one of the two parts we were waiting for arrived today at our Willits maintenance yard. So that project, weather contingent, will be getting started again very, very soon. And then dump days, we did hand out dump days in Ukiah at the Pumpkin Festival. And then in Laytonville, we'll be doing a dump day by voucher. We'll have a Clean California tent handing them out. And we wanted to really target the least able to pay for their own dump services. So the tent in Laytonville will be at the food bank, something hall, Harry Hall, something hall.
Harwood?
Yes, that's it. It's December 15th. So they'll be in line. When people come in line for their food, they'll be able to get a dump day voucher. It's open to anyone, but we wanted to make sure that the underserved were aware of the opportunity. And then finally, we have a large item dump day for Casper scheduled for December 16th. And that will be at the transfer station. And we're going to try some new ways to move people through faster. Last time we had to close down pretty early because of the outstanding turnout, and we didn't want to snarl up traffic on Highway 1. So we've got some new ideas, and we're going to try again in Casper. So.
Well, Julia, one of the benefits of the project in Covelo is that it already is slowing down traffic.
That was the number one thing they wanted, was to slow down traffic. So the light posts are in, the median divider is in. We're working on, we have done some traffic counts and the county has done some traffic counts. And then once the speed humps are in, it will change the traffic flow again. So for the short term, we have that K-rail in right in the downtown area by the median barrier. And that was there to protect the workers doing the work and people from driving into holes, which of course we don't want. But once that's removed, the speed humps will cover a much larger area from the first to the last, and will again, I think, push traffic back onto 162, but at the lower speed. So that's what our traffic engineers have figured out and what we think will happen. We should know pretty soon. Any other Clean California questions?
Not seeing any here in the room.
Then anyone can always reach out to me directly or through Tasha. I'm always happy to talk about Clean California. Thank you so much for your time.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Julia.
And I had nothing else today, unless there are questions that I can respond to.
No, and I want to just point out that the Caltrans Milestones report was included in the packet.
All right, thanks. That takes us to Mendocino Transit Authority.
I have no report.
Okay. And Great Redwood Trail, is there any updates there?
Yeah, we hired a general manager. Her name is Elaine Hogan. She's from Blue Lakes up in Humboldt County, and she has worked for the County of Humboldt. We're very excited about her. She's high energy and very knowledgeable about, redwood or, trail construction and administration. So we're looking forward to good things.
Okay, well, thanks. That takes us to MCOG staff reports.
Okay, so you have the summary of meetings. I don't have anything to add to that, but happy to answer any questions. If not, I'll go on to an update, just a brief update on the back to Covelo, the SR 162 corridor multi-use trail project. So the contractor crew is getting ready to wrap up for the season. They will be able to, weather permitting, they're not working today and probably not tomorrow given the wet conditions, but there was a section of the project that work was stopped because of some late archaeological discoveries, and so had to go through a process to assess those discoveries. That was complete, and we got the go-ahead last week from the state to proceed. So they should be able to actually get that section paved before they wrap up for this season. So that was great news. So the project will be a 2-year project, as I've mentioned before, because of the bridge. The bridge will be happening next year, but with the exception of the bridge over Mill Creek and then one segment near the casino, the entire length of the trail, including the east-west portion, will be far enough along to be usable between now and when construction starts back up again, which is great news. Even the portion by the casino, although it won't be finished, there is a walkable surface there, so it will be, that portion will at least be walkable. So the project is really coming along, and between that and the Clean California project, it really looks like a whole new community, so very exciting for that area. So that's all I have on that, and happy to answer any questions. Oops.
And we did post a few pictures of the project on our website.
Oh, yes, the progress pictures are up on the website, and you can see all that's being done. If there are no questions, I'll move on. So I wanted to share with you that the California Transportation Commission has reached out to us and would like to hold a town hall meeting in Fort Bragg in April of next year, so April 17th and 18th. These are meetings separate from their regular business meetings that they typically have monthly. They're usually a couple months a year, where rather than having a standard commission meeting, they have these town hall meetings in typically smaller communities away from where they usually meet, as an opportunity to highlight what's going on in those regions. So it's very exciting news. It will be in Fort Bragg, but we'll be able to feature information and projects from all over the region. So it is a 2-day event. It's 2 half days. Typically how they work is there's a tour of approximately 3 hours on one day, and then a meeting on the second day, or could be in reverse order. But the meeting itself can include presentations from all around the county, or even be an include interregional issues. So it's an exciting opportunity to bring the CTC to our area. There's usually a reception as well between the first and second day for CTC commissioners. So we'll be able to show them what we've been doing, show them some of the exciting things that we've been doing in our area, and then also maybe highlight some of the ongoing needs that we have for additional improvements. So lots of planning to come on that. So the RTPA, for town halls, the RTPAs are the official hosts. So this will be an MCOG hosted event. We'll be putting the agenda together, and so working with CTC staff over the next few months to plan that effort. So, any questions on that?
Well, I gave a couple suggested
Yes.
venues, and I don't know if you've had a chance to follow up on any of those. Or...
We actually have a meeting later this week with CTC staff, so we'll be discussing some of those things. So I have not followed up on any of those, but yes, I do have. I've made notes of everything. And
the California Coastal Commission was in Fort Bragg not that long ago, and so I was sort of cribbing off of their venues.
Dan had lots of useful information for me.
And what days of the week are those?
So usually their regular meetings are Wednesdays and Thursdays. So April 17th, so yes, Wednesday and Thursday. So April 17th and 18th is a Wednesday and Thursday.
Director Novell, did you have any comments?
I do not, thank you.
Okay. All right, well, thanks. I guess that takes us to miscellaneous.
Yes, I do not have any miscellaneous items. Okay, so yes, no administrative miscellaneous items.
Our next meeting is December 4th. Then I guess that takes us over to planning staff.
Thank you. I'm Loretta Ellard. I just have a few planning staff reports. First of all, on the Ukiah Transit Center feasibility study that we've reported to you regularly, I wanted to just give you an update on the status of that. I believe we previously told you that the MTA board selected the preferred site that was just north of Coles, and then the current information is that at the October 25th MTA board meeting, the consultant team presented some conceptual or actual architectural renderings of how the site would look, and then the plan is to present the draft study at the December 6th MTA meeting with the final study in January. So that project started about a year ago, and it'll be wrapping up around January. Any questions about that? If not, I'll go into my next report. We're excited to report of another grant award, which we received notice of just after our last meeting, $100,000 grant from Rural Planning Assistance. Is that Rural Planning? RPA funds. We applied to update and expand the local agency's local road safety plans / action plans. You might recall that a couple of years ago, MCOG administered a project to prepare the LRSPs for all of the agencies. And then we learned sometime after that, that in order to be eligible for a new federal funding source, we needed to add some components to those plans. So this is a relatively small project, $100,000 with a short time frame. We're hoping we have an RFP out right now with the proposals due in a couple of weeks to do a hopefully about a 6-month project to update those plans and add the necessary components to get the local agencies in line for the next call for projects of those that federal source, which we anticipate to be next spring. So any questions on that? So that was great news. We were happy about that grant. Let's see. Thirdly, I did report last month about the Noyo Harbor Multimodal Circulation Plan grant that we received. So the status of that is we are still awaiting a notice to proceed from Caltrans on that, and then we will be preparing and distributing that RFP. And then the final report I have is that MCOG staff has been working closely with the Potter Valley Family Resource Center to prepare an application for state funds through CARB. It's the STEP program, Sustainable Transportation Equity Project, which would implement another one of the recommendations in our recently completed rural mobility study. So we're happy that the Potter Valley Family Resource Center was willing to pursue this grant, and that would be to implement a shared mobility microtransit service, a van, a shared shuttle van, to Ukiah twice a week and locally within the community twice a week. So we're pleased to see agencies, acting on the recommendations in that study that the MCOG board accepted in August. If that is funded, MCOG will join the project as a sub-applicant and will help with outreach and wherever else is appropriate. And I think that's all I need to report on. I see Jacob did not report on the short-range transit development plan. That's not an MCOG-led project, but MCOG staff is working with MTA and their consultant on that 5-year plan update. And the status is that the consultant will be soon ready to present a memo with some draft recommendations on potential changes on the MTA service plan. And that would be at a meeting in December. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thanks, Laura. Okay, then I guess that takes us to MCOG director reports. Any director reports? Well, the county and the city of Fort Bragg are co-sponsoring with Caltrans a ribbon cutting for the Pudding Creek Bridge rehabilitation project. So that's going to be next Thursday. It's a very tight location. You can't really get the general public there because it's right next to the bridge, right next to the highway. So it'll be invitation only, but it'll be recorded on video and people can see it after the fact if they can't make it in person. And Nabili, I think you're going to be there probably, or?
Yes, I think I will be there.
Yeah. Okay. Any other director reports or CalCog reports?
Well, with CalCog, there hasn't been a meeting this month. There's a retreat this week in Riverside, but I'm not going to it. And there's the statewide CalCog meeting in February that I will be attending.
Okay, right. Well, then with that, looks like we are adjourned at 3:17.
All right. Thank you.